This is the Artemis podcast. We're your co-hosts, Annita
and Paige. There's no one definition of a sportswoman,
but we're here to explore the stories of the million ways to be one
and how sportswomen are leading the conservation movement. I hope you're hungry. I'm Paige McMahon, and today I'm joining Annita Lucchesi in the kitchen to explore how she likes to cook Indigenous foods. Annita is a Cheyenne descendant and passionate home cook. And in today's episode, she's teaching us how to make contemporary recipes with Indigenous ingredients such as steelhead, elk, huckleberries, and wild rice. I love learning more about how to incorporate Indigenous foods in my cooking, and I hope you will too.
All right. Annita, we are so excited to be joined by you today. What are you going to be cooking for us?
So I am showing you guys how to make some different Indigenous foods. I tried to pick things that I think hunters and anglers might encounter in their time outdoors, but also chose things that I think you could find at most health stores. Cooking Indigenous foods might sound like unknown or maybe exotic or hard to get, and they're really not, because we forget there's so much that is stuff that naturally occurs in the woods and on the water and is a part of our day-to-day life. Today, we're making roasted steelhead with a prickly pear glaze. We are making wild rice and elk meatballs. So kind of like porcupine meatballs. It's not porcupine meat. They just call it that because the rice kernels kind of stick out like porcupine quills. And I have some roasted sweet potatoes we're going to make with some cool looking chanterelle mushrooms that are from the woods here locally. We're going to get the broth for the meatballs cooking because we want that to cook down as long as possible. And I'll show you what's in the pan. I know it's hard to see, but we have flat cedar, which is a traditional medicine that Native peoples all across the continent use. It smells amazing. This is from cedar in Wyoming. It's important.
Does it have that typical like cedar smell?
It does, but the important thing is that there's mountain cedar and western red cedar. And the western red cedar that you see here in the Pacific Northwest, you don't want to use for cooking, or like cedar tea is really good when you have a cold. But if you boil it, there's like a film that comes up on top and you have to skim that film off. Otherwise you can get sick from it. So today we're cooking with mountain cedar that won't give us that. In addition to that, we've got some wild mushrooms that are dried that I've been saving for a special occasion. So you can see I have a cute tiny little dried morel here. There's morels, lobster mushrooms, a few different kinds in here. And then we have some chunks of berry.
Orange for any of them?
I am not a confident mushroom picker because I'm so afraid of picking the wrong thing and like going on a bad trip or something. And I don't want to do that to the people I'm feeding either. So no, I didn't forage these. A friend of mine did and dried them and gave them to me as a gift, which I'm very thankful for.
Yeah, I also have the same fear of foraging.
Yeah, that's so real. And I will say, like, it is cool to know what you're picking, and I would love to learn sometime. And I think it's more intimidating than it actually is hard, but it's still out of my wheelhouse currently because I'm so paranoid about drugging people accidentally. So I'm going to stick this on the stove, but the rest of what's in here is some salt. I will say I use local, this brand Pacific Flakes salt. It's really large flakes, and it's directly harvested from the Pacific Ocean, like 10 miles from where I'm standing. And it just, when I go back to Montana, I stock up on this. It tastes so much better. The texture is so much better. It's really good on steak because it gives you that like crust you want. But let's get this broth going. My cord almost.
I'll definitely have to look because obviously I'm close to the Atlantic Ocean and I've never actually thought about getting fresh sea salt from around here. I'll have to look into it.
You know, like Ina Garten when she's like, and if you don't have fresh vanilla straight from Madagascar that you're scraping yourself, store-bought is fine. That's how I feel with my salt. We have that broth going. Now we're going to get the mushrooms and the sweet potatoes in the oven. So we're going to make the kind of like sauce we're going to drizzle over. I'm starting with a base of sunflower oil. And the reason for that is you want an oil that can tolerate high heat. I like sunflower has kind of a nutty taste to it. And it's sunflowers are a native ingredient. I think my favorite experience of life on my homelands in Southeast Montana is in the summertime, we get like a million sunflowers that come out. And it's just so special to drive down the back roads and see ditches just full of them and fields just full of them. And sunflowers are my favorite. I have a big sunflower tattoo, actually, not in a place I'll show on this podcast.
So these sunflowers grow native?
Yeah, sunflowers are indigenous to this continent, which I think a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah. Around me, we have like sunflower farms. And so they will take a farm field and pack it with sunflowers. And then, cars line up and they charge $20 for you to go take pictures in the sunflower field.
I mean, that sounds fun, though. While we were talking, I made the sauce that's going to go on the mushrooms and sweet potatoes. It's sunflower oil, maple syrup, and some guajillo chili. All of those are indigenous ingredients. I like guajillo chilies because they have kind of like a fruity taste to them and they're not super like oppressively spicy. I love spicy food, but I'm making this for my dad and I know he doesn't. So we're just gonna spoon it over the chanterelles and sweet potatoes. And you can kind of like, I always just eyeball it, go with what tastes good. Taste as you go. And like, that's the magic of cooking versus baking. You can taste as you go and just kind of go with what feels right. Like, I'm going to put a little more.
I myself am more of a baker than a cooker and then a cook, I guess. I'm
wildly impressed by that because
I trust my recipes.
Baking is like, if you mess it up, there's no going back. Like there's a science. It's magic to me. Whereas cooking, you can kind of like correct as you go. Okay, I'm going to stick these in the oven. And I'm definitely a type B type cook of like, I don't care what kind of like container you put it in. We're not invested in that. It's whatever you have available. And it's going to be fine.
For the sweet potatoes, did you dice them up? Is that how you cut them?
Yeah. Just kind of like 1 inch chunks, 1/2 inch to 1 inch chunks.
Yeah.
Now we'll make the glaze for the salmon and put the salmon in the oven too. I have this locally made prickly pear jelly with plums in it. Plums are indigenous to this continent and one of my tribe's favorite snacks. And prickly pears, believe it or not, also grow in Montana. I think people think of it as way too cold, but we absolutely have prickly pear cactus. And I didn't know, like I had seen them in horse pastures and stuff, but I didn't know it was the same thing that I was seeing in like Arizona, and that it was like traditional to us, but it absolutely is. So that's kind of cool.
I had no idea about that. That's interesting.
So we have some of the jam in here, a liberal amount of salt, more of that sunflower oil. And we're just going to mix it up till it's like liquid form. I will say you don't see me using pepper. When I cook like non-indigenous recipes, of course, I always use salt and pepper. But in this case, native foods, especially like plains style native foods, which I'm from a plains tribe, we don't really, it's kind of embarrassing to say it this way, but like we don't use seasoning. And like the measure of a good plains native style soup is that it has all of the flavor from the meat, not necessarily additional seasoning or spices. And we use, there's like there's a million different kinds of sage, but there's one in particular that tastes salty. So we use that for salty flavor on top of like the natural saltiness of meat. But other than that, we're not really spice people, which I know like
Interesting.
sounds crazy because why would you want something that hasn't had salt and pepper on it? But I promise it's going to be good. So I'm just
Very
spooning
nice.
that glaze over the steelhead now. And it's steelhead season on the river, one of my favorite things to fish for. As you know, Paige, I have not been successful lately. This is not a fish I caught, although I would love to pretend that it was.
I understand. We all go through our challenges.
You know, I think like fishing, I look at it similar to like crafting, where if you're not in a good mindset, no matter how many times you try, you're just not going to be successful. Is that an experience you've had, Paige?
Yeah, I do think that that's true. More with like duck hunting for me. It's, you know, when things just aren't going right, they just keep going wrong. And I find a lot of it is like, if my shot is off, then I get so in my head about trying to fix my shot that I'm not relying on my instincts. I'm thinking too much, and it causes me to continue to keep missing instead of just like resetting and moving forward.
Yeah, so, that's very real.
I don't know if I've actually admitted this to you, Annita. Do you know that I don't eat any fish?
But you fish all the time.
I do. Yes. I live like in my current situation, I live probably 10 miles from the ocean, and I love to saltwater fish, but I eat absolutely nothing from the water.
Not even like shellfish?
Nope.
I'm
no
stunned.
Lobsters, no clams, like, and we have, you know, some of the freshest seafood in New England, and I eat none of it.
Just know I will always take your lobsters. That's wild.
Yeah, that's what people are like. You have lobsters in your freezer, and like you don't eat them? No.
So you just give them to family and friends and stuff?
My husband eats them. My husband loves them, and my entire family eats all the seafood. So I would never, like, if I was out fishing and I was going to keep a fish, I always checked with my brother or my dad or my sister and said, like, do you want to keep the are you ready to eat the fish? And if they said no, I would never keep it, because it's not the right thing to do, and I don't touch it.
Wow, that's a new fun fact that like I can't believe we're months into our friendship and I didn't know.
Yes. Both of my grandfathers like to tell me that they wanted to disown me because one of them ran a fish store and the other one ran a marina. So yeah, I was the black sheep.
You just don't like the texture, the taste?
So.
Interesting.
Everything. I've tried all the different ways. And I keep like hoping that I will reset. Like, you know, they say your taste buds reset every 7 years. So I keep trying, and none of it.
I really crave seafood. I miss it so bad when I'm in Montana. And then when I'm here in California, I feel like I'm going out of my way, especially things like local stuff like oysters or salmon or, I love crabbing because like it feels like it's so good for my body. Like there's just so many nutrients and it just feels so fresh. I feel sad you don't like it.
I want to love it, but I cannot eat it. So I'm
sad.
Quite interesting in that. But tell us what you're doing now.
I'm mixing up the meatball mixture. So I have the elk sausage in here with some wild rice, some more of that chunky salt, some more of the cedar, and then I mixed in some huckleberries. This is my last bag of huckleberries that was in my freezer.
Oh no.
And I stopped picking huckleberries because there's a really nice logging road behind my house that has a lot of bushes and really nice berries, and it's a beautiful spot. There's always eagles around there. But my friend was like, there's a lot of wildlife that uses that logging road as like, a corridor. And he was like, I hope when you go, you bring bear spray and a dog because every time I go out there, I see mountain lion. And I was like, no, I have not been bringing bear spray or a dog.
Oh.
And my dogs are not reliable to protect me from a lion. So I haven't gone out there. I would go out there with somebody else. I just don't want to go out by myself. But it is interesting to think about like a conservation perspective on like, the timber industry. And like full disclosure, my family's been in the timber industry for generations. But when it's done responsibly and in a way that takes care of the long-term health of the forest, there's all sorts of kind of surprising benefits sometimes, like, having an easy corridor for wildlife to move around. And I know the deer certainly love the easier access to those huckleberry bushes. And it's a cool way for, folks who live nearby to be able to experience the woods in a way that's a little more accessible. Like I've taken people out on that road that walk with a cane or something like that and can still, get out in nature. So I'll just show you what it looks like now. You can see there's like, it's kind of, elk meat is dark anyways, but this is darker from the huckleberry juices. And kind of studded with that wild rice.
Okay.
And really, like, there's no science to what it should look like. Your meatballs, you want them juicy enough to be juicy when you're done cooking, but not so juicy they fall apart. These, I think, are pretty there. I think I'm going to add a little more rice.
Now, did someone in your family harvest an elk recently, or how did you get elk?
It's funny. I don't have elk hunters in my family, and you and I have talked about how I really want them because I really want elk ivories for jewelry, and in my tribe, women wear dresses covered in elk ivories. So someday, hopefully, there's an elk hunter in my family. But no, I actually got this elk from the grocery store. And I think, again, that's like a cool thing to highlight about accessibility of wild game meat. If you're not an elk hunter or don't have opportunities for that, it's sometimes your local health food store can carry stuff like that. Although, Paige, I know you don't have that problem because your husband elk hunts.
He does. He did not get to go this past year, though. And quite frankly, we had a tragedy with our freezer that I am still not over. So we lost the last elk that we had. And so, yes, we went on vacation and I opened the freezer and grabbed some summer sausage, like as we were heading out the door, elk summer sausage, and thought I closed it and came back a week later and it was disgusting.
That's terrible. I'm so sorry.
And it was very sad. It was not a fun day.
Yeah, but, that sounds heartbreaking. Yeah. Especially because, like, it's not like it's easy for him to just go out and get another one. Like, it's never easy to harvest an elk, but especially because you guys are all the way in New England, like, it's not something he can do on a regular basis.
Yeah, exactly. So it was very sad. We definitely have changed the way we do things, and I check every freezer shut with both hands, trying to make sure that is totally closed.
I would do the same. Yeah. I just turned to check on that broth because I can hear it boiling in the background, but it smells amazing. I wish you guys were here to smell it. Kind of that like earthy mushroom smell.
I wish I could smell it.
And then like the sagebrush, the earthy mushroom smell, and then that like kind of more woodsy floral cedar smell.
Sounds like it smells delicious. One day, Annita, you will be cooking and I will be there in person.
I would love to cook for you. Cooking is definitely one of my main love languages. And I love to cook for, like, I cook for my nieces and nephews a lot. And it's funny because I don't think of myself as a bougie cook. I just like making things from scratch, and like making healthy things. I like making things that have native foods in them, because my body feels so much better when I'm eating those foods. But the kids, sometimes they'll like look at it and be like, Auntie, we know this is fancy and gourmet and delicious, but it's too fancy for us. We want ramen. So I've had to learn to calibrate like my apparently bougie sensibilities and the palates of teenagers. Meatballs done. Gonna go put them in the broth so they can cook. It is the cord is stuck in the drawer. It is important that if you're making porcupine meatballs that have rice in them, they need to cook in a broth. You can't just put it in a skillet, because the rice needs that moisture to cook. So now everything's cooking and we just wait.
Awesome.
I can share, like, I think there's something really special about connecting with Indigenous foods. I do think that they're healthier. And even just from the perspective of like, even domestically raised bison, can't have the growth hormones or antibiotics and stuff that beef gets. So it can be healthier that way. And it, in general, as you know, that kind of meat is leaner. But I think too, like for me, it's a really nice way to connect with my culture when I'm far from my homelands. And to feel like I'm still like doing things my ancestors did, interacting in the land, with, the way they used to do, even though it's different, they're still like, it's something that connects me to them and connects me to the land, in a way that feels good.
All right, Annita, I'm so excited to see the final result.
Well, we have it nicely plated. I have it here. I'm also going to hold it up to the phone so there's a better look. But we have our potatoes and chanterelles, which I've never cooked chanterelles this way before. I'm going to be honest. It was an experiment today and it paid off because it's the best mushrooms of my life. And now I will forever cook them this way. It was so easy just throwing them in a pan with the ingredients we talked about, and they're delicious. So we've got sweet potatoes and mushrooms here. We've got our prickly pear glazed steelhead here, garnished with a little bit of cedar and huckleberries. And then our elk sausage meatballs here. The meatballs are fun because I think it's a taste that, like, it's not a flavor profile that I think non-native people would be familiar with because of the bare root and the cedar in the broth that they were cooked in, which are both kind of, the bare root is kind of almost like warming spices because it has that kind of gingery note to it. And then the cedar, like cedar tastes how it smells. So picture like a nice like cedar box that you would put quilts in or something. It tastes kind of like that, but in a good way, almost kind of lemony, but also woodsy. And then the mushrooms just do such a nice job of standing up to that like more gentle heat of the Guajillo chilies. It's really delicious. My dad cleaned his plate and then left because he was afraid of being on camera, but he was very happy with his plate.
I'm glad to hear that. It sounds like it was delicious. Is there anything else you want to share out about it?
Just a reminder that like these were all things I got at my local health food store. Of course, if you hunt elk or you fish for steelhead, you're going to have this in more abundant quantity. But also, like, for our listeners who don't hunt or fish for those things, or maybe aren't super outdoorsy in general, maybe you're listening because you want to learn about what it's like to be outdoorsy. All of this I bought at my local health food store. And it's, I think more stores like that are starting to carry local fish and wild game. You can get bison at Costco. Yeah, this is more accessible than one might think. And also a reminder that like things like sweet potatoes that are kind of an everyday thing you see in the supermarket everywhere, they are an indigenous food. So you can eat indigenously and mindfully while still shopping at whatever your local supermarket is. I will figure out how to put together recipes for these. I will say like it's all by taste and feel and eyeball. So I can definitely make an ingredient list and like a procedural list of how to cook these things. But in terms of quantity of the ingredient, that's up to you. And I encourage, cooking to be a creative and tactile experience, and for like you to experiment with what tastes right for you. So we'll have that up on our site so that you can replicate this.
We'll link it in the show notes so that people can click and see your list.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. It was wonderful to watch you cook. I am jealous that I am not anywhere near you to actually get to taste it. But one day, maybe you can come and cook yourself lobster and have that for fun.
I will come and cook you something that's not fish. Maybe someday you'll have extra elk in the freezer again, and I can cook you some of that.
Yeah.
Today's podcast was edited by Tanner Saul. For more details about the episode, don't forget to check the show notes.